Welcome to today's webcast. This call is being recorded. And now to begin the program, I'd like to introduce Tracy Cook.
Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to today's webcast, Eliminate Print Servers, VCPI Simplifies Printing Across 2,400 Locations, presented by Redmond Magazine and sponsored by Printer Logic. I'm Tracy Cook, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, but we'll also be taking questions throughout. So please feel free to submit your questions into the Ask a Question box on the left side of your console at any time during the live webcast. And as I said, we'll answer your questions as we go along. And finally, this event will be archived and available for replay. We'll send you an email within the next 48 hours informing you when the replay is available. Now a little bit about the webcast. We have three excellent speakers with us today, including Nick Cavalancia, industry expert from Techvangelism, Eric Graham, Chief Technology Officer at VCPI, and Devin Anderson, Product Manager at Printer Logic. So at this time, I'd like to pass the event over to Nick. Nick, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Welcome everybody to the webcast. In the world of enterprise environments, you think of the challenge of managing countless printers and drivers, the users, of course, OS compatibility issues, and so on, all in a world where changing desktops, failing printers, and even OS migrations are like a daily occurrence. It all adds up to be a very extremely complicated effort just to keep printing operational. And so it makes sense that you might be wondering, is it possible to overcome the challenges normally associated with printing and create a more simple printing environment where you're not only happy, but your users are happy as well? If you can you do that? And so in today's webcast, we're going to take a look at this issue, but do it through the lens of a single organization, VCPI, and they're a managed service provider. And we're going to discuss their printing challenges and kind of look at a case study, if you will, and look at those challenges that they had and how they overcame them using Printer Logic. Now, the thing that I want to kind of first cover here is that this is probably not going to be your ordinary webcast. I think it's safe to say that. The way that we're going to kind of do this today is I really want you to think more of like an interactive podcast than a webcast, in that we're not going to do a whole bunch of slides. This is more of a conversation. As a matter of fact, it's a conversation that we really want to include you in on. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about sort of the itinerary today a little bit, is to talk about the challenges of print servers in the enterprise a little bit by looking at this example from Eric at VCPI. And then kind of look at this as a case study, the problems he was having, the way he was able to resolve it, the challenges, and how he overcame them as well. And then we want to discuss kind of how he used Printer Logic as the solution. So rather than the traditional kind of let the expert talk at the beginning and then the vendor will do their pitch at the end, we're going to kind of just really have a conversation overall, and there's no demo at the end for you to watch and then have to go, oh, another one of those, I don't want to see it. It's okay. We're going to actually do this more in a way that is kind of a real use case scenario and then see if there's something to be learned here. Now, the thing that we do want is we want to make sure that you guys get a chance to ask questions along the way. If there are ones that are pointed at Eric, I'm going to try and be paying attention to the questions as he's answering the questions that I'm asking him and we're going back and forth with. And then I can kind of maybe pull some of your comments or your questions in and help color the conversation. We want to do that as well. And then, of course, if you end up having questions about Printer Logic, I'm probably going to save those to the end if it makes sense, or if I really think it makes more sense to slip them in the conversation, we'll do it as we go along. So feel free to engage with us. Don't just think this is something where you have to sit back and listen, but I want you to recognize you're not going to miss anything if you just kind of put your ears on, but you're not really worried about what's on the screen. So I'm going to leave this slide up, and that way no one has to go and chat over and go, are the slides working? Am I supposed to be seeing something? I'm telling you right now, no, you're not. We're going to go ahead and kind of have more of a conversation about this and kind of learn a little bit about the challenges Eric's having. So Eric, let me do this. Let me start by asking you to tell the audience a little bit about VCPI, so they have a better idea of not just about your organization, but maybe the specifics around the organizations that you're supporting. I think it's kind of a unique situation.
Sure. Well, as Nick said, I'm Eric Graham. I work at a company called VCPI, and we are a managed service provider and a Citrix service provider for long-term post-acute health care. That's a lot of letters and words that go together, but it basically means nursing homes and assisted living centers and everything that's kind of in that same genre of health care. It is not hospitals. at this point in time. We also are rather unique in our space because we call ourselves a total solution provider, which means that we will also take care of all the endpoints at your facility. We will take care of the Windows updates on domains, make sure applications are installed out at the facilities. Normally, as a managed solution provider, you're focused on the inside, what's in your data center, what's in your cloud, and how do they get to it. We take that from end to end, and we're the only one in our space that's doing that currently. So right now we manage a little over 2,400 of these nursing homes. They're spread across the entire nation, 48 states I believe in right now, and they're split among about 80 different clients. For some of those clients, I'm doing all of their IT. They don't have any internal IT people, and for some clients, we are supplementing a very large IT staff and dealing with the infrastructure so they can do higher order IT things like worry about applications and how to make money. To support those nursing homes, we have about 2,300 servers in our data center. 1,700 of those are Citrix servers, serving up the electronic medical record applications that they use to take care of their patients, along with email and timekeeping and any app that you can probably think of. We have it hosted somewhere within our environment. Any questions about what VCPI is or does?
No, that makes sense so far. It's interesting, I kind of laughed there for a second because you said some people, I do all of their IT. And I'm going, well, you're really busy because you're doing it all of you. So you've got obviously a larger staff, or you've got a help desk staff.
I have a staff of 37 engineers, yes, that takes care of these
Okay,
clients.
so there's a bunch of folks doing that. So with 2,400 locations, how many users does that represent, roughly?
About 87,000.
Okay, tiny little.
About 87,000 users and about 20,000 endpoints that we fully manage, and about 70,000 that we touch but don't really manage.
Okay, let's focus in then and drill in onto the printing environment. Can you talk a little bit about that so that the audience here, if you look at the companies that the audience represents here, they're obviously larger organizations. And some people are small as well, but there's some large organizations here. And I just want to give them a sense of the size of the challenge that you have in front of you in terms of managing printers.
Sure. On average, every facility has 3 printers. Some have more, some have less, but on average it's about 3 printers per facility. And so I believe right now I have 6,000 licenses with Printer Installer, and I still have a couple clients we haven't migrated in yet. I'm still actively working on it. All that's running off a single Printer Installer cluster of 2 nodes, both virtual servers. And what else do I want to talk about here? Oh, one of our biggest challenges with the printing is Citrix, to be honest. I don't know how many of you use Citrix, but printing has always been a challenge within a VDI environment. How do you install those printers? How do you manage them? And you end up with a lot of driver incompatibilities within Citrix. And Citrix's solution to that is to install the printer on the endpoint and then use Citrix's universal driver to pull that printer into the environment. The challenge that VCPI was having is we've been doing this for 15 years, and well before Windows really kind of was the standard across the board. We were actually a fully Unix shop way back when. And not all of our clients want us touching all their systems or fully managing the environment. And we didn't really have a whole lot of good tools to get printers down to the workstations except using login scripts and group policy. And neither one of those really did exactly what we wanted. We always ended up with performance issues. And to simplify driver management, we're using a lot of print servers. Every client had at least 1 print server. Some of the larger clients had up to 6 or 7. And when you go through a login script, unless you're going to get really, really granular, which we were not able to do because the clients can't tell us how to be granular in some of this stuff. So generally, every person was, on average, mapping between 3 and 10 printers onto their workstation when they logged in the morning. each one of those printers adds a significant login delay
So let me ask you a question.
the VDI environment. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Actually, I thought you stopped talking there because you were, you went out there for a second there. No, that's okay. No, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. I got to collect my thoughts here sometimes. When you add multiple printers to your login script inside of Citrix, it takes between 10 and 15 seconds to map each printer in, and that's just the spooler doing its job pulling those printers in. So if you're mapping 10 printers, it's adding 150 seconds to your login time. And then they call me and tell me it's slow, and I said, delete your printers. And then they get it down to the one printer, and they're all happy again, and they accumulate over time, and then they call me back and say it's slow.
You're screwed if you do or you don't, aren't you?
The service provider, that's what we do.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So that's really kind of what we do with printing here today, or what we have been doing. Is a lot of print servers, a lot of printing, direct IP printing from the Citrix server directly to the printer. Because we were not able to physically manage the printers on the endpoints without a lot of labor that I did not have and the clients were not willing to pay for.
So this is an interesting environment because you don't actually have access to manage every aspect of it like most of the audience members probably do. But how does this environment like this impact your customers' business, all these print servers, all those printers? I mean, you've already touched on the idea of the login scripts and it taking a lot longer, 150 seconds, I think, as you said. But what other are some of the big impacts that this kind of an environment that you have to set up for them, that was the printing environment that it has on the customer?
Probably the biggest problem that we were having was spooler crashes on the print servers. When you start installing multiple HP drivers, which seem to be the worst culprit, they have memory leaks and they crash, and then it brings the whole spooler service down, which brings, nobody can print, and they call the service desk, and yes, we have some monitoring in place to resolve that. We resolve a lot of it, but what we've been seeing more and more recently is that it doesn't really crash, it just kind of hangs. So it looks really busy, but it doesn't actually crash, and it's hard to detect that. We've got some detection in there, but it generally causes between 30 and 40 calls a day to the service desk of I can't print, and then you go reboot the print server. And that it's not good for the clients, it's not good for me, it's not good for my engineers. Each of those takes a half hour to resolve. That's 20 hours a day that I'm just resolving spooler issues on print servers. And much better things to do with my time, and my clients would just like to hit print. The other big one was bandwidth. A lot of these print jobs, they're printing people's medical records through direct IP printing from the print spooler in my data center over a VPN tunnel over the internet to a printer in their building. And the direct IP printing, it's going to print as fast as it can. And yes, I can put some bandwidth policies on that, but it's just going to push as much data down to the printer as fast as it can go, which then causes internet slowness, Citrix slowness. Everything is slow until that print job completes. That was another large problem of why I didn't want to use print servers anymore. Part of our model is we pull all of the server hardware out of the facility. These facilities that we're managing generally don't have anywhere safely to put a server, and in most cases it's either in the boiler room or it's in one of the bathrooms on a shelf, and it's just kind of hanging there. Neither one is a good place to have a server in an environment, and with all the concern about losing protected healthcare information, our model that everyone in the business really loves is we just don't have any data in the facility to be lost or stolen. It's all in our data center where it's secure. So that's why we're doing the remote print server part of it.
Are you being serious about the bathroom out of curiosity? Because that just sounds, I've never thought of ever having
some of the pictures I've seen, you would laugh. You would laugh.
Yeah. That's where I keep my servers, in my bathroom. So I'm sure everyone else.
Oh, why not?
I've seen a closet that's 97 degrees with no air conditioning in it, but I've never seen the server in a bathroom. So, all right. So we got spooler crashes. Do you think the bandwidth is because of the spooler crashes? Just out of curiosity. I mean, the spooler crashes are because of the bandwidth potentially, maybe.
No, they're not really related. I don't think.
Okay.
I never really tried to correlate those, but the spooler crashes were generally because one person was printing to an HP printer and another person was printing to a Xerox printer, and the drivers don't get along. You can do as much driver isolation as you want, especially with the newer operating systems, and it didn't really seem to help anything.
And I got to imagine the drivers are a big issue for you, just given the number of locations and the number of clients and what they prefer and that sort of thing?
That's correct. We have no control over what hardware our clients are using at their site, either the endpoint PC or the printer. We have recommendations, but we're just their service provider. We support whatever they choose to buy.
All right, so then the question would be, so you got three issues here then. You got driver issues, you got spooler crashes, you got bandwidth. So what kind of, so I'll call it the printing-related workload, for lack of a better term, but what kind of taxing does this put on the VCPI staff then?
Well, I already spoke to, about, say, 30 to 40 printer spooler crashes a day. That's 20 hours a day in engineer time fixing those problems. But in addition to that, with across the entire environment, we're replacing between 7 to 10 printers a week. And you can visualize that yourself. If you have like a Xerox copier, every 3 years, those generally come up for lease. And then I need to go and replace all of them. It's usually with a newer model with newer drivers, and then you got to go touch. Every facility has about 30 to 50 endpoints in it, depending on how electronic their medical record is. So every time I replace a printer in a facility, and keep in mind I do this 7 to 10 times a week, we'll use 10 as an easy number, I have to touch, say, 50 devices. So I have to reach out and change the driver on 500 endpoints every week because a printer was swapped out. That adds up really quick. If it takes me 10 to 15 minutes to manually do it, which is why we weren't doing it, by the way. We were just doing it on the print server and then using scripts to pull those down, which caused my other problems. And then one of our primary services we offer is service desk. So we say if you have any problem, call us. We'll get you the right person to fix it, or we'll fix it ourselves. And that's quite a bit of service desk calls. We average about 1,000 calls a day. And once we implemented printer installer across these clients, it dropped by about 20 to 25%.
My only comment is wow.
Yeah, big.
I'm wondering, out of curiosity, can anybody in the audience beat that? Or can you come close? Put something in the question box. I'd love to know if anyone can come close to that at all, because that just sounds like a tremendous. We always hear those stories, and even like, I used to work at 3 different software companies, and we always tried to come up with an ROI calculator. And we tried to say, for every printer you're spending this much time, and or whatever it might have been that we were trying to make a software product for, we always try to show some ROI. And this is like, you're literally like, you're the perfect case study from the standpoint of like, it really does. You can quantify. I have to do this many a week. It takes this much time. I'm amazed. Devin, let me pull you in. I've been focused on Eric a bunch here. Would you say that Eric's challenges are a unique set for an enterprise customer, and maybe even take it down to the small and medium-sized business too, an SMB customer, only because in sum total VCPI has kind of like, they're like one big enterprise customer, but in reality they've got a bunch of little SMBs to deal with. So are these unique, or are there some other challenges you think that come in play?
I mean, of course, there's some points that are unique to some of the people out there as far as, that highly distributed environment with lots of different subsets. But even if you look at it from just a corporate environment with all the different sites that you might have, or, a lot of the companies, they don't have the luxury of having a single vendor printer and therefore simplicity around driver management. There's a lot of complexity in those environments. And just being able to remove the print server and being able to do direct IP printing, and not only just do direct IP printing, but have managed direct IP printing, and simplifying that whole environment really had a quick ROI. And and I think when Eric talked about the number of support calls that he was receiving, those are hard dollars. Those are dollars that you can track and understand when you go in and implement a management solution that takes care of those issues and problems.
That's totally fair. I appreciate that. So, Eric, let's move kind of forward in the story a little bit. So we've talked about the problem a bit. You got these 2,400 locations. You got, I think you said like 6,000 printers or something. We've laid out the kind of the groundwork for some of the problems that are existing, how it's impacting both the customer and you. So let's talk about maybe looking at the solution and what you were trying to find in a solution first. So was there some key set of criteria that you were looking for when it comes to, you've outlined the problem. I think everybody gets it without even you having to go any more detail. So what was the criteria for you going, I've got to have at least these three things, or there's no point in buying something or finding a solution, right? We should build it ourselves, and so on.
Well, the problem actually started, and maybe some Citrix people here can relate, when we were moving from XenApp 4.5 to 6.5 and changing operating systems from 2003 to 2008, R2, is when this really kind of hit the fan of all the problems with the spoolers, because we had to upgrade all the drivers from 32-bit to 64-bit, and that's really where the real pain in our organization started. As a knee-jerk reaction, we reached out to some of our other partners, and we actually installed ThinPrint. And ThinPrint worked really good. It did its thing, except we started projecting that out across the entire environment, and I was going to be paying ThinPrint close to $1 million a year. I said, we need a better solution. So I started reaching out in the environment, and I really couldn't find a good competitor to ThinPrint, but I ran across PrinterLogic at one of the shows. I believe it was Citrix Synergy, and immediately just saw what the potential of this product was. And as I was looking for, you asked about criteria, I needed to have the spoolers stop crashing. Citrix's solution to that was don't use print servers. And the solution to not using print servers was PrinterLogic. It just fell into place so nicely of, now I can actually manage the printers on the endpoints and get rid of this complex print server architecture inside the data center and all the problems that causes with driver management. Get the printers on the endpoint, so only the printers that person needs are installed. Only the printers that person has installed get pulled into Citrix. Then inside Citrix, it's just a universal print server, so I'm dealing with a single driver within my server environment. It just was so perfect of a solution. Some of the other criteria I was looking for is I need to reduce bandwidth. If you use the Citrix Universal Print Driver, pulling printers in from local, you print over to the Citrix channel, which compresses the print jobs between 50 and 80%, so it reduced my network bandwidth at each of these facilities by half. Just awesome. And they stopped, or they reduced their usage of the print servers quite a bit, which with less usage, the problems there went away. And I couldn't get rid of the print servers entirely, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the thing that I really, really liked about PrinterLogic was the self-service capability of it. For the most part, none of my users have admin rights in their endpoints, so they can't install their own drivers. They can't screw up their endpoint, which means they also can't fix their endpoint. But using PrinterLogic, having the icon on their down on their tray to I need to install a printer, they click here, it takes them to a web page, shows them a map of their facility, they say, yep, I'm here, I want to print to Betty's office, I'm clicking on her printer, and it installs it without the user having to have admin rights, configured exactly as the admin set it up and told it how to be configured, using the right driver, the right IP, the right tray settings, the right everything, and it just works. It's so beautiful. So that self-service piece of it, that reduces my service desk calls as well quite a bit. When they say, I just got a new printer and I need to have it installed, I said, all right, open the web page, click here. After they call me once or twice, they just do it. They don't need to call me anymore. And I think that's about it.
Fantastic. So Devin, let me ask you a question here. When you're listening to the criteria that Eric's talking about, are there other common criteria for people that are looking for a solution like PrinterLogic? And maybe I'm going to add one other caveat to that. And does it differ between, let's say, an enterprise customer that's got tens, thousands or hundreds of printers versus an SMB customer with maybe tens up to hundreds of printers?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so a lot of the similar type of things like Eric was talking about as far as bandwidth savings and those type of things. And then the self-service aspect is something that we hear about quite often, right? If you look at where a call is generated from when it comes to service desk calls, printer management or printer problems are typically right around the number 2 slot. So that's a pretty pretty severe number of calls that are coming in, and a lot of those can be alleviated, one, by removal of print servers, because now you're going to remove all those problems and issues, but then also with the self-help portal, being able to allow end users to help themselves, like Eric talked about. It doesn't take long before they start to help themselves and being able to do that. But then you also get the scenarios where it's not just about helping myself now, but it's about the fluidity I get by being able to use the system, of being able to transfer from office to office and travel across the country and walk up to a printer and easily be able to look at the printer and say, hey, gosh, I want to print to this printer, and right there's an email address, and I can just attach a file and send an email to that email address, and immediately it starts coming out of the printer. Or whether I want to implement, we have a lot of people who have to implement release printing or even secure printing, where they want to have the flexibility of people not to have to think about where they're printing. They just print and then walk up and use the embedded applications to release the jobs, or even in the case where it's a secure printing environment, so when you start getting into healthcare and with HIPAA regulations or into legal or other things where you really don't want that job to come out until you're standing right there at the printer and you've either authenticated through a badge swipe or a PIN or password. And so there's a lot of enterprise needs, and it's really dependent on the vertical that they're in, what regulation and compliance they have, and then the environment and the architecture of their network.
Eric, did that come into play here for you with the users printing and not knowing where the print job ended up, kind of a thing? Because obviously HIPAA is a big issue for these customers.
It is. That's probably the second biggest printing issue that we have other than spooler crashes is I don't know what my default printer is. So they'll be at one particular facility or nursing home, and they'll set their default printer to print down the hall, and then they'll get up and they'll go to another facility, and where'd their print job print at the other facility that they were just at, and that does cause a lot of potential healthcare protected healthcare information being leaked to places where it really shouldn't be. Now, granted, it's within the same company, it's just at a different facility, so it's really not a breach, but it really shouldn't have happened either. It's all secure still, but so by getting rid of the login scripts and the policies and using whatever the default printer on the endpoint is as the default printer inside of Citrix, and then configuring the endpoint to use location-based printing so their default printer automatically changes based on what subnet they're in, they don't have to think about where they're printing anymore. They know as they move around without them having to do anything, their default printer is always where they think it should be, which fixes a lot of other problems. It fixes a lot of problems for the users.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I remember being just at an outpatient, one of those little, not the mini ERs, what do you call them, urgent cares, and they gave me my printout for my stay, when I was there, and I looked at it when I got home. It was somebody else's. And I mean, that's a totally different issue, but I could just imagine in this case where you've got multiple facilities, you have, not just like 5 people in a small urgent care, but you've got, tens or hundreds of people at an organization, one long-term care organization, but still, I think the potential is there, certainly. Obviously, it happens because you're saying it's the number 2 thing that happens there. So, yeah, it's not entirely surprising. So let's move forward in the conversation here to talking about having a solution in place. So we kind of outlined the problem, the 2,400 locations. You talked about, I'm going to try and do this from memory, driver issues, spooler crashes, bandwidth, and then you had a certain set of criteria that you felt that PrinterLogic helped meet. So let's talk about those 3 challenges. The driver issues, the spooler crashes, and the bandwidth, and tell the audience a little bit, I guess, how it was rectified with PrinterLogic.
Well, once we went through our testing phase and a couple pilot clients, the clients actually jumped on board, and they started driving this within their own organizations, and I didn't have to fight them anymore, which is kind of cool. To get, they don't like change. Nobody likes change. But by adjusting our Citrix policies and our group policies associated with that, getting the PrinterLogic client pushed out, using some of the policy within PrinterLogic to always make sure people had a default printer, even if it was a brand new PC, there's a copy machine in every building. That's generally what they want the default printer to be. So we just create that as a policy that if this printer doesn't exist, as soon as the printer installer agent logs in, it installs that printer if it's not there and sets it as default. So everyone now has a printer, always. It's always what they expect it to be. It's a direct IP printer. It's the only printer, generally the only printer installed in the endpoint, so there's no driver conflicts. We're not mapping it to a print server inside of Citrix, using Citrix policy or group policy or a login script. And therefore, they're not printing through a print server anymore, so no spooler crashes. Their login times into their Citrix environments have been cut in half due to the reduced number of printers that they have in their profile when they're logging in. Let's see what else. And if they don't like the printer, they just open up the web page and add whichever printer they want. They have the full ability to add, remove printers, and it's all done via an interactive map on the screen. So they don't have to remember, what printer C is. They just look on the map and click on the right picture. It is literally been a godsend to saving labor and increasing my customer happiness.
There you go, Devin. There's your quote. It's a godsend. Put Eric's name underneath it. So the next question, I want to go back to you had talked about all the help desk calls earlier on our call today. What's that look like now in terms of, you talked about, I think you had, 7 or 10 printers or something every week going down and a number of devices, and you talked about how many help desk calls. Can you reiterate that a little bit and talk about what does it look like now?
Sure. Well, we're still swapping out anywhere between 7 and 10 printers a week, but instead of that generating 30 to 40 incidents or service tickets to get drivers changed, it's part of the project to replace the printer. We just go in the printer installer and change the driver that's published, and as the agents check in, they automatically download the new driver and get it configured. So the amount of labor and incidents required to replace a printer is, it used to be between 10 or 15 hours. It's now down to 30 minutes. So that's pretty significant on my side.
Yeah.
I charge a flat fee to set up printers, and the less labor I put in to making that change, the better it is for me and for everyone. So that's one. Our service desk calls, like I said, we're averaging about 1,000 calls a week at the time, and that dropped, I think, by 237 calls after we got in, a significant portion of the clients moved over to this. We're still at 1,000 calls, but the environment's 20% bigger, so we grow quite a bit. And that has really helped our service desk. We have 80-some people on our service desk right now, and we're trying to meet SLAs for call hold time, and if the calls can be shorter, more precise, or fewer of them, it helps us meet our service levels as well on that one. Let's see, what else were you asking me there? How were they rectified with printer logic? The self-service aspect, I just got to keep going back to that. They can now help themselves instead of having to call me for everything.
It's got to be huge.
That is huge. Much fewer problems on the print servers and the printing environments overall.
Let's talk about print servers for a second. You talked a little bit about, you mentioned them early on about trying to eliminate some but not all of them, and now I'm just reminded because you're talking about as part of the process of changing out a printer. It sounds almost like in some points you might be kind of migrating a printer over to printer logic, if you will, as part of just as they go. But was the idea of eliminating a print server as a goal? Did you accomplish it? What does that look like?
I know that's your favorite saying, to eliminate print servers. I have a T-shirt that says that from you, if I remember right. But that was not one of our goals.
That's Devin's favorite statement.
That was not one of our goals, to get rid of the print servers. We have significantly reduced the number of print servers. We're down to 1 per client instead of having multiple for some of the larger clients. And the reason we still have some is there are endpoints in our environment that I cannot install local printers on. Good examples are Weiss thin clients, Linux-based OS thin clients, Some of the Windows CE, I still have almost 1,000 of those out in the environment, and there's just not drivers or space on these endpoints to install printers. So I'm still using, I'm actually using Printer Installer inside of Citrix as a separate instance to sort of deal with some of these endpoints that can't do local printing. And the product works equally well inside the Citrix environment. It looks the same, acts the same. I have the same training program, same training material for all of it. And then as I'm looking at your future offerings within the space, I'm going to want a print server for every client, because then we can, some of these features that you have coming up about the email a document to a printer and have it print. I mean, that's going to require a print server. No, sorry, the Printer Logic server for that client. And I'm actually using the Printer Logic server to keep track of the inventory of those printers, so I don't have to have that in a separate place. And it just makes everything work a lot easier in my environment in particular, to keep the print server in the environment. Printing from voice terminals, like I said, iPads, Androids, and mainframes. There's still, I still have some AS400s I support for some people that, they want to print to a print server. It's just easier that way.
Interesting. So any other benefits? I mean, you've gone in a couple directions, but I just want to make sure that anything else you can think of that would be another benefit of where you're at today over where you used to be.
My clients are happier.
Okay, I'll leave it. That's fine. And you don't have to have an answer. There may not be one. That's okay.
No, I do have one more. Go ahead. So one other thing, we do a lot of form-based printing. The nursing homes have to, it's all Medicare and Medicaid, so they're very stringent on how some of those, on the forms that must be used and the alignment and all those. One of the issues we always used to have was, all right, so this printer works on your endpoint, but you're using a LaserJet 3 driver and you're using a LaserJet 4 driver. By installing the Printer Logic agent on the endpoint and saying this IP address gets this driver, I now have standard drivers across the entire environment without having to go to every endpoint and validate config. They're all named exactly the same. All the printers, if that printer is the same name on everyone's endpoint, so we all are speaking the same language. They're all using the exact same driver. It helps my documentation. It helps the service desk. It helps the client. And those are also very important benefits coming out of this.
That makes total sense. No, that's good. I appreciate that. I was happy with the happy users, but I'm glad you had some other things as well. Devin, on your end, what else should the audience be thinking about in terms of how Printer Logic can help? This is sort of normally the time when there's the pitch, but obviously in lieu of that, what else should they be thinking about that we haven't talked about today?
Yeah, our mantra is definitely eliminate print servers and simplicity in the environment. And so, just hounding on that one more time of that we, like Eric was talking about, being able to reduce the number of print servers and the cost associated with that. If you look at just the cost of managing a server being around $2,000 to $3,000 a year, there's huge cost savings there. And then also just visibility into your fleet of printers and some interesting things are a lot of times when we think of some of these new technologies and capabilities like being able to print from your mobile devices and things like that, we think, okay, well that means I'm going to have to buy a printer that supports AirPrint or those type of things, or Google Print, Google Cloud Print. But what we've done is we've built in technologies and capabilities that allow you to use modern devices on just any old network-based printer. So, don't put yourself into a box as you're looking at some of these new technologies and feeling like, well, we can't really look at those and providing those services to our end users because the cost of refreshing our fleet will be too much. We're there to help you take the fleet that you have today and leverage it in the best way possible. And then as you, replace your fleet over time, then you're covered as well. And then once again, it's like I talked about earlier, is there's a lot of concern about, what technologies you put into place in your environment, and will that create a vendor lock-in of of which manufacturer printers and things like that. And that's one of the beauties of printer logic, is we look at it and we say, hey, we want to be a heterogeneous solution. We want to be able to manage and provide the technologies that you need across everything that's in your environment, so that you don't have to worry about if you're acquiring a company, or if you change where you're purchasing, or if, whatever it might be. We're there through that whole journey, through that whole life cycle.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Okay, excellent. So there's a couple of questions that we've got here from some of the audience here. I noticed, Devin, you actually chatted with Russell earlier on the call directly, but I thought other people might actually get something out of the question that he asked, so I'm going to go ahead and just put it out here. So Russell had asked, so this would allow me to migrate network printers that are configured for IP printing, correct? So is that the limitation there, or is it more than that?
Yeah, it depends on how he's asking the question. I'll answer it in a couple different ways. So if we're talking about network printers that are using print servers, it's as simple as taking the printer logic management solution, pointing it at the print servers, pulling in all the printers and profiles, etc. And then once you deploy the agent out to all the clients in your environment, those printers are automatically converted on those PCs to being direct IP printers, or use direct IP printing. And so the case is that, here you are, you've got your print servers, and we see that about almost 80% of our customers within 5 days or less are already up and running and implemented to where they could remove their print servers in their environment. So it's simple. It's really easy. Now, the thing that when you think about direct IP printing, then all of a sudden you start thinking about, okay, well, what does the management look like from there? Well, that's where we come in and we differentiate from anything. And that's where we come in, we say, hey, look, it's not only about converting to direct IP printing, it's about managing direct IP printing. How do you replace? How do you replace printers, update printers, change drivers? All of that is super easy and simple. And that's why when we go out and we survey our customers and look at how happy they are, you've heard it very clear from Eric, there's some great quotes like you mentioned, but that's why we get a Net Promoter Score of a 66. And if anybody's familiar with the Net Promoter Score, that is a super high Net Promoter Score. And what that means is if we were to ask our customers if they're likely to recommend us, they're extremely likely to recommend us, because we are solving real problems with real solutions that they can implement in their environment. And not only that, they can do it in a short period of time and see that ROI in a very short period of time as well.
Let me ask you kind of a tied question off of that from what Devin said. He talked about implementing in a short period of time. Can you go through a little bit around how long it took you to get it up and running, that sort of thing?
It does not take very long at all. Generally, the part that is hardest for me is not the implementation, it's the training and the communication, and then validating what the actual printer is and what the correct driver to use is, and then getting the settings on each of those printers. To make these printers work inside of Citrix, in a lot of cases, we used very simple drivers. So like for pick a brand new HP printer, like a 4050 or something like that, we would use a LaserJet 3 or 4 driver, because that was the one that was stable inside the Citrix environment. But when we go with the printer installer, we want to put the right driver on it, because it doesn't have to be stable in a terminal server multi-user environment. I go with the recommended driver on the endpoint. So that's where some of my time comes in to get these things working correct. But it does not take long at all. You configure all the printers inside the web page by sucking them in from the print server, make any tweaks that you want, push the agent out, done. My hard part's in the cleanup and communication piece of it.
That seems about right. The drivers always seem to be, no matter what you're doing, drivers are always an issue, but this seems at least you're getting it done once and you're finished. Kenneth has an interesting question that might either go to either of you, because Eric, you might be in this situation, but you might also not be. He's saying, how does a solution tie in with multiple domains? To say multiple domains where the companies have no trust relationship between them, so in the two domains, but they need to print from one domain to the other. So how would we do that?
Do you want me to take that one, Eric?
I can talk to it, because this actually highlights something else. When I first installed the product, this was impossible. But one of the first feature requests I asked for that PrinterLogic jumped right on and delivered in a fairly short period of time was this multi-domain printing. I can tell you how it works in my environment. I'm not certain I can directly answer your question, but I always, well, I shouldn't say it. I generally have the ability to put a trust in between the domains. And I've created a resource domain a long time ago that is the center of all my trust relationships. So as things that need to be multi-domain aware, I put into that resource domain, and then they can use the trust relationship to print in or print out. The way the agent works is it will use the machine account of the workstation that you're on to validate who you are and what you should have access to. And so as long as that machine account can talk to the web server and authenticate, it should work just fine. Now let Devin give you the real answer. But in my experience, it works good over trust. I'm not certain if you can't have a trust in place.
Yeah, no, that was a great explanation, Eric. And then, on top of that also, even in an untrusted environment as well. So if there's not trust relationships between the domains, we fully support that.
And it's just I just thought of what I think the right answer is here. The printer's not in a domain. The printer's an IP address. So you just need to, that make sense? So as long as your printer logic server, you publish that resource to, you can publish it multiple times. And as long as the domain is there to authenticate against your workstation can authenticate, then it should be fine.
Yeah, and even on the client side as well, then we work as far as managing across the multiple domains as well, even if they're not trusted. So, yeah.
Okay,
so
I got another one from, that is a good answer. I've got one from Bill. Bill's got an interesting situation here. He says his copier vendor locked him into an on-premises solution. And by the way, Bill, I'm going to commend you for using the term premises, and you didn't write on-premise like most people do. It drives me insane. A premise is a previous statement. A premises is a place. So he says this copier vendor locked him into an on-premises solution for secure release and print, or there was secure release and email printing, and it doesn't offer a good experience with his printers, even though using multifunction printers, and he wants to know how he can be sure to get that he get a similar, good user experience regardless of device or brand. And that sounds like a Devin question to me.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's actually a topic that we have quite often here is how do we make sure that end user experience is consistent, no matter how people are interacting with their printing service. And so when we look at whether you're an HP shop, whether you're a Ricoh shop, whatever it might be, our goal is to make sure that we support those and give the same end user experience on those. So for instance, if you were to walk up to an HP printer or a Lexmark printer, then that embedded application that we have on the control panel looks and feels and acts the exact same way. You swipe your badge, you'll see the same user interface, everything else. And so that's one of the beauties of using a solution that's not tied to a particular manufacturer, because you'll be able to traverse all the different manufacturing brands and still have that same end user experience. And then the goal also is not only at the embedded control panels, but then also when you get to your mobile device, how you interact with your tablets or your workstations, etc. That's where our goal is to make sure that is simple and easy to use. Because like Eric talked about, when someone goes into the self-service portal and he shows it to them, we want it to be to where they just get it. It's intuitive. It gets them exactly what they need to do with as few clicks as possible.
I mean, that's good. Okay, so I want to kind of step back here. I'm reading one of these questions that came in from Josh, and this makes me think we need to rewind the clock a little bit. He's asking, and this is sort of a higher level question, does printer logic and the printer installer that he's heard about, does it just take the place of a print server? Do print jobs travel through the server? I think there's sort of maybe a base architecture question here that needs to be answered.
Yeah, great. I can take that one. That's easy. So it does not take the place of a print server. What it does is it removes the need of a print server. And so in the typical printing architecture with the print server, you're right. So jobs are going to go to the print server. They're going to be rendered there. Then they're going to be sent to the printer, and that's where all the drivers and everything are handled. Well, in the world of direct IP printing, what happens is now you don't need that anymore, because now instead it's the endpoint that's taking care of all of those roles and sending it directly to the printer. Now the beauty of that is, we talked about print spooler problems or all that kind of stuff. Well, with a print server, all of a sudden you're impacting a lot of people all at the same time as soon as you're starting to have challenges or problems. In the direct IP world, direct IP printing world, now all of a sudden everything is being sent directly from the printer or from the client to the printer, and so you're removing that middleman. You're removing that bottleneck as well.
All right, there's another question that is a sort of a rewinding the clock a little bit in the conversation. Susan's asking, we've heard a lot about this being used in a Citrix environment. Does it work in others? And that's fair. We've been talking a lot about Citrix today. Eric has been. So does it work in something other than a Citrix environment?
Yeah, we have.
Real quick.
Okay, go ahead, Eric. Yeah, you take that one.
I'm a Citrix service provider, so that is one of the primary solutions that I use to deliver my client. So I apologize if I pulled Citrix in all this. This is a way to manage printers on endpoints primarily, and everyone needs a printer on their endpoint. So anything that uses endpoint printing, this printer logic will help you on. They also have the ability to put this in the multi-user mode, so you can use it on a terminal server in a Citrix environment, on a server and just a server itself in single user mode. It really works across all the Microsoft environments that I've tried it in.
Do you have anything to add?
No, I think that was perfect.
He's hired. All right, so other question I've got here from Jimmy saying, can you talk about the cost effectiveness of the solution? You mentioned that the other was very costly. How does this compare?
Okay, I'll take a shot at that one. The cost models are very different. Printer installer is a flat fee per printer per year, unlimited usage. The thin print product that we were using is per user per month, and I have to generate usage reports and send them. So the more traffic we sent to it to fix the problem, the higher my cost was, and it didn't scale very well.
And Devin, anything to add to that, or we're good?
No, that was perfect. There was another question that I thought was interesting that came up through the question section, and that was around Windows Server 2012. I don't know, do you want to take that, read that question out, and we'll take it?
Oh yeah, sure. Sure, that's one of the other ones I got here. It says, Brian wants to know how the functionality of printer logic differs from the new features built into Windows Server 2012 R2 in the printer role.
Yeah, and I won't go into this in too much detail, but I'll kind of hit it on the top level. So when I think of the printer role, that's not just new to 2012 R2. That was back in 2008. They had that role as well. And, some improvements, enhancements, but it's been available for years. And one of the biggest things, and we've hit on this multiple times, so I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but is really when you can offload the responsibilities of IT to the end user. And that makes it sound bad. When you can empower the end user to be able to participate in IT and be able to resolve things themselves, then that drives down costs and improves their satisfaction and their happiness, right? I mean, if I can handle something myself. And so one of the big differences is, can you provide that self-service, and not only self-service but with maps. And so just visualize the floor plan map of your environment, and as simple as dragging and dropping printer icons onto this map, and all of a sudden you have this populated map where your end users can go in and click on the printers and install them, etc. So those are huge things. And then, the other thing is as you're looking at your environment, being able to support a more heterogeneous environment once again, right? So what about Macs? What about, your different operating systems? We talked about vendor lock-in before, and I've seen this over and time again, where as a vendor, the predominant thing that you're going to develop to and focus on is your own solutions first. And so how do you support those Macs in your environment? How do you also support even some of the more legacy OSs and not have to go ahead and move to Windows 8, et cetera? So those are just a few of the thoughts that just kind of bubble up in my mind as to an answer to that question.
I would like
Russell's
to add
got a
couple things to that. Go ahead. I would like to add a couple things to that one. So most of the features in the 2012 R2 are distributed to the endpoints using group policy. And one of the reasons why we went all out on group policy and printer management, publishing printers and all that, and it really added to the group policy processing time that occurred on every login, and it was significant. It was like 20 to 30 seconds when we were trying to do all this printer stuff in 2012. When 2012 R2 came out, we put it up in our lab. Honestly, I tried to get rid of expense in my environment as much as possible. So we tried to duplicate this, and other than the self-service piece, we were able to. But it was a pretty complex group policy, and it took some time to process in every login. And then for the moves add changes, I now have to have someone who can modify group policy and have that right. And right now, using Printer Installer, I can delegate that down to my service desk instead of having to have those calls escalated up to an engineer. That's just my 2 cents.
I think your 2 cents is worth quite a bit here. You are the star of the show here, it seems. So Russell's got more of a, I think it's a comment, but I think it might be worth adding it to a question somehow, or making it into a question. We got like 2 minutes left or so. But he says, our desktop support folks prefer a print server versus IP printing because they can manage and delete the print jobs from the print queue, where a bad print job just gets dumped to the IP printer. So maybe either of you, either Eric, if you've experienced something like this, maybe how PrinterLogic helped you with dealing with it, or Devin, from your standpoint, what does PrinterLogic offer in a situation like that?
Hey, Eric, why don't you take this, because you'll have the real life scenario. I love it coming from a customer. Are you?
If, instead of having to call the service desk, yep, I'll take a shot at this one. Instead of the user having to call the service desk because it's spewing out 500 pages of gobbledygook, the user can now delete their own print jobs, which they can't do on a print server.
Perfect. And so, even if the help desk, and even if that help desk call, then if they don't know how to do that or whatever, gets back to you.
And they do it.
Yeah, I mean, right there you can see what the queue, what jobs are in there. You can go and delete it, and take care of it.
Well, I guess that's it. That's easy enough. You guys have got the answers, man. I love this. This is cool.
So,
hey,
Nick, I want to let me clarify that really quick, because I'm not sure if it came across it. So you don't even have to remote into it or anything, right? You can actually, right from the management console, look at that printer and you can see what jobs are queued up, et cetera, and delete it straight from there. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that.
I think you were. So Andy says thanks again. You're welcome, Andy. I hope it was informative. And it looks like we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and cut us off. If you have any more questions, you can still feel free to pop them in here, because they'll get passed over to PrinterLogic, and someone from PrinterLogic will get back to you. So don't worry about that. We'll definitely help you out there. Eric, thank you very much. I think this was really informative to the audience. I'm looking at the number of attendees that are here, that started and where we ended, and it looks like we've got a real consistent number. So I think they did get something out of it. Devin, thank you for some of the vendor perspective there, and I think the audience even appreciates that it wasn't too preachy, because they like to know, but they don't want to necessarily be sold all the time. So guys, thank you very much for a great conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Yeah. So with that, Tracy, I'll get back to you.
Great. Well, we should also thank you, Nick, for doing a great job. And Eric and Devin, that was great with the presentation and the wonderful Q&A. So we appreciate the three of you taking time to be with us. And I'd also like to thank the audience for joining us today. The event was sponsored by PrinterLogic and presented by Redmond Magazine. Thanks again, and enjoy.